So we're going to be looking at Michael Gove's comments about Brexit. Well, some of his more recent comments, and yeah, let's just dig into this one and let's get charged up and do this. It's going to be a painful one. So I think part of the article, or part of the things I actually said, I think I agree with to an extent, but it gets very dicey later on. So trust me on this one. So let's go for it. So Michael Gove claims that the coronavirus will concentrate the minds of EU Brexit negotiators. So on the face of it, you think that sounds a bit stupid, but he says that he's the one leading negotiations. So first he says that it's going to concentrate minds, and that it's entirely possible to get a negotiation, entirely possible to get a trade deal done by the end of the year. I think that's a load of nonsense. So the second round of negotiations ended on Friday, so that was last Friday, I believe. The EU weren't happy with the things we were saying. We're not happy with the stuff they're saying. So we'll dig into that in a minute. So Michael Gove, Barnier describing the process as disappointing. So I think he's going full storms. He's saying that I'm still disappointed. Giving evidence to the House of Commons, Gove said, "I think the COVID crisis in some respects should concentrate the minds of EU negotiators, reinforcing the vital importance of coming to a conclusion." Don't know what's going on. It is undeniable that a fair-minded observer looking at the situation would say that there are difficult challenges ahead for individual member states and the EU itself. However, the professionalism of the European Commission negotiating teams, that's Barnier and the gang, and their focus to try and make progress has not, so far as I can see, been affected. Obviously, we know that Barnier caught the coronavirus and he's okay now, thankfully. But at the same time, it did affect them, so let's not pretend it didn't. But Gove's kind of arguing that it's going to force it's going to focus them on coming to a conclusion, whether that's no deal on their part, so saying like, well, look, we can't come to an agreement, see you later, or saying, okay, look, we'll agree and we'll give terms. This will be the agreement. And so this is where things get dicey. Gove spoke hours after the Prime Minister's official spokesman called for political movement on the EU side to move negotiations forward, particularly on the so-called level playing field designed to ensure the UK does not diverge from EU rules in a way that give a country a competitive advantage. So the EU has certain rules, for countries to follow, so other countries within the EU don't get an advantage, like with services and things like that. And so the idea is you create a level playing field in order to stop other countries from getting a massive edge, I guess. I don't know, it's very difficult to explain. But at the same time, it's important to note the fact that if say Spain or Italy start slashing regulations left, right, and centre, a lot of companies are going to move within the country that's done it, because they're going to get a much easier time and make more money. That's why Ireland's always had problems with allowing tax evaders, and the EU's always been there on their case about that. And so that's the reason why you have high standards throughout each EU country, or at least you try to an extent. And so that's the EU kind of fear as Singapore on the Thames, I think people have called it. So what they don't want is the UK to become like Singapore, where you have very low regulations, very low income tax, because then that means that a lot of EU-based companies will come here, which won't benefit the UK massively, purely because a lot of them won't be paying taxes and they'll be screwing workers and things like that, because we'd have to lower workers' rights in order to get these companies in. So the only people that benefit is the owner class and the bosses, essentially. So chuck some marks in there as well, because I can. I'm not that learned, trust me, but yeah, so the only people that actually benefit from that is kind of the owner class and the managerial class to an extent, not the workers, because the workers will have their rights slashed. So if we carry on with this, so essentially the UK is mad that the EU won't budge from their position, and the EU are mad that we're not going to budge from ours. So Gove's ruled out an extension, and I'll get to that in a minute, because that's quite stupid, especially his reasons behind it. He goes, we are not asking for a bespoke, or Gove is saying this, we are not asking for anything bespoke or new or tailor-made. We are asking simply for a series of off-the-peg arrangements which replicate what the EU has done for other countries, Gove said. But he wasn't specific. He didn't say, some of the deal they made with Canada, or some of the agreements they have with other countries. He wasn't specific at all, so we don't know what the hell he's talking about here. So Gove told MPs the UK government has drafted legal text with the EU negotiating team on the free trade agreement it seeks. So we've actually given some documents at least to say this is what we want. We want security cooperation and a number of other areas, and we hope to put forward a document on fisheries soon. But as soon as it's clear the EU has moved away from its negotiating position of imposing the current status quo on fishing quotas. So what he's saying is, once you've changed your position, we'll let you know what we want. So when Man United bid for Jadon Sancho, Dortmund can say we want 100 million, and then Man United, we're not going to pay that. So Dortmund are like, all right, how much are you willing to pay? And United are like, we'll get back to you once you lower your price. And you're just like, what? That's not how negotiations work. You set your price out, then you go from there. So these draft texts will be published in the coming weeks, so hopefully by the end of this month, hopefully. The EU has made a virtue out of necessity, so this is where Gove gets super dicey. When it publishes its own text, since it wants to avoid leaks, he said. So I've not seen too many leaks from the EU side. I do try and follow the people who would cover this. They haven't put much out, so I'm assuming there's not many. And so Gove's trying to say that, the EU are trying to avoid leaks, that's why they're always putting documents and stuff out. But realistically, they've set out their negotiating position because they've already had set structures for trade deals. You've got the Canada model, the Norway model, the Swiss model, etc. And obviously, we don't want any of those. And so the EU are like, so what do you want? And we're like our own kind of deal is like, what specifically? And then we'll go from there. And the UK are like, we'll get back to you on that. So the government has discussed with industry, this is where it gets really bad. So the government has discussed with industry the creation of a customs training academy. So they're still discussing this, and we need this 50. So it says we need 50,000 customs agents to implement the withdrawal agreement and the Northern Ireland Protocol, Gove said. So look, we're in May now, and he's discussing the creation of an academy. So say this thing gets built by July. You have about 6 months to train people to become customs agents. I don't know how long the training process is to become a customs agent, but I can't imagine it's easy, purely because there's going to be a lot of new stuff coming in, like quotas and checks to come in, especially because now we might have potential tariffs with the EU. And so I don't know what the exact training would be. I assume it's got to be at least like 6 months to a year minimum. And so he's going to train these 50,000 people within that time. And so and he hasn't actually said how many customs agents they've actually recruited. So that says to me he hasn't done a lot, because otherwise he'd say if it's about 40,000, he would have said, look, we've already got this many. But I think it's not that many. So he goes, however, so continuing on, Gove talking about, I think this is the writer talking about, Christina Gallardo. The UK continues to resist pressure from the EU to set up a permanent office in Belfast to oversee the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. So what they haven't asked for anything mega unreasonable. They've asked for an office essentially, and so what we've called it is an embassy. We said they don't need a mini embassy in Belfast. We'll do our thing. But given the fact that we haven't built a lot infrastructure-wise to do checks, and we know it's very expensive, also the fact that we haven't, the EU are going to be like, so where the customs agent are going to be like, they're in training, bro. They're in the hyperbolic time chamber. A room where you can do a year's worth of training within a day. That's the only way this stuff's going to get done. Because I can't see any other way it's going to happen realistically. So if we move on to this comment by Gove here, an extension has been ruled out because we don't want to pay more into the EU budget. So Gove further apparently said this. He goes, we don't want to be European light, because that would mean spending money that should have been spent on the NHS. This is where Gove goes further beyond, because this is just horrible to say that we're going to fund the NHS with the money. This is going back to the 350 on a bus. And so this person here wrote, I'm sick of their fake concern for the NHS. Every time they want to get their evil way, people who vote for these clowns don't deserve anything nice. I wouldn't go that far, but what I would say is the fact that they always go to the NHS because this is a thing that people care about. But eventually people have got to realise that money's not going to the NHS, especially because through the coronavirus, the government have started privatising more NHS duties, and that's something I'll talk about in another video, hopefully. So look, if we jump to this article from the FT, we can see here that Gove claims we'll need 50,000 people to be recruited to carry out customs paperwork under the government's preferred Canada-style deal. So what happens if we don't get a Canada-style deal? How many more customs agents will we need to make sure everything we're eating is fine, especially if the government sacrifices agriculture? Because given the fact that we can't get enough workers right now to work within agriculture, and that farmers are struggling to pick fruit that's already ripe and ready to go, where are all these people going to come from? And I spoke to Georgia, our resident expert on stuff like this, and friend of the show, friend of the show. And she said that it's going to slow down trade massively, and you got to imagine if we're buying fruit that's ripe from another country, if it takes days, weeks, or months, however, to come to this country, it's going to be rotten by the time it gets here. And so look, Gove is a joke, and look, I've got some footage here of what Gove thinks he sounds like when he speaks, when he says an idea. So this is Aaron Gordon at the slam dunk tourney, and look, this is how he thinks he looks when he speaks. And this is how he thinks everyone's going to react. But realistically, I think when he speaks, people think he's on something. I really do, because he's mad. He's mad. He really is.
He must have been high or something.
And so, look, what we can see. One further point. Sorry, I forgot to mention, is the fact that look, if you look at how much these border ranges are going to cost, right? So I've done some checking around. If you look here, 21,000 a customs agent gets paid, right? And obviously it'll be more or less, probably be more on average, because you've got managers and stuff like that. So, oh god, so we go 21,000 multiplied by 50,000, it's over $1 billion. It's going to cost over $1 billion, and you can say, oh look, Madge, we're paying nearly 9 billion in each year to the EU. So what's the problem here? But we're paying $1 billion just on salary to trade for these people. Imagine the staffing cost, the cost to build the infrastructure, how much that's going to cost and maintain over the years, especially because we don't do infrastructure properly in this country. We just haven't. And so look, we can see that Gove's a bit of a clown, but Gove, mate, maybe spend more time actually doing your job and actually negotiating properly, instead of messing up, and spend less time maybe reading racist books like the Bell Curve and Holocaust Deniers books. And remember, like, comment, subscribe, and look, Michael, I'll be good to you.
You're good, you lay off for the cocaine.